So I suppose welcome back everyone to Unlocking the Talmud. You know, you guys were here last week. We worked on Baraisa. We didn't have so little. I intended to go over this Gemara last week at the end. It's a piece of the Cont'd that talks a little bit about Baraisa. The words of the Mishnah. I mentioned on a couple occasions that the words of the Mishnah are very concise. The Tanaim, the Chachamim of the Mishnah. They would teach they had very wide minds. They were very intelligent, very smart, very sharp, and so they wanted to put their teachings, they could understand their teachings in very, very few words. And so as a result of them being in so few words, so that's what they passed down. The Mishnah, therefore, ended up being in very, very few words. In other words, very concise, very terse. And there was a lot of things in the Mishnah that as the generations went on, and the Amoraim, after the time of the Tanaim, the Amoraim kind of lost the ability, I guess, to really derive them straight, to see them straight from the Mishnah, and to pass them straight from the Mishnah. So they brought in Baraisas over time, as Baraisas were also Tanaic teachings that were more miforish, they were more explained, they were more lengthy, they were more, explained out here. Let me just these. And those Baraisas, so as we talked about last week, are not as strong as Mishnayos, and sometimes the Gemara will reject them. But one of the reasons why the Gemara might reject one is if it can't be derived from the Mishnah. If you look at a Baraisa, and you can't find any source for it in the Mishnah, the Gemara will reject it. And the reason why is because what I just said is that everything was included in the Mishnah. Sometimes it's b'derech remez, it's a hint. Sometimes it's there clearly, but the Mishnah is very concise and very precise, very similar to Mikra, to the Torah itself, where we were able to make inferences from the way and the manner in which things are said in the Torah. So too we do this with the Mishnah. So Baraisas have to be able to be derived from a Mishnah. You have to be able to find, every Baraisa has to be able to be derived from a Mishnah, and if it can't be, then it's another candidate for what we talked about, the Mishnah Beshta, a mistaken Baraisa, is also a Baraisa that isn't taught and based on a Mishnah. Which that does not include Baraisas that come from a Gadata. Those two Baraisas in Halacha, they have to be based on the Mishnah. Baraisas in a Gadata, it doesn't need to be hinted to in the Mishnah. That said, within the Amoraim, there are three camps, but two major camps, but three. The two camps of Amoraim were basically, we'll call them in this shiur poskim, like our halachic authorities nowadays. Their fundamental focus in learning was learning in halacha and learning how to apply the halacha to their daily situations and working in dinim and serving on the beis din and whatever. Then there were a second camp. There was one, as I said, three camps really, but so the half a camp, they were called Tanaim. Even though they were called Tanaim, they weren't. They were actually the least of the three. They were essentially, I would say, human computers, basically. The Tanaim in the time of the Gemara were individuals who had fantastic memories, and so they would learn incredible amounts of Baraisas, huge amounts of Baraisas, or Toseftas and like everything. And they didn't necessarily even know how to interpret the Baraisas. They just memorized them by rote. That was what they did. And they would recite these Baraisas in front of an Amora, and they were called a Tana. The Amora would interpret the Baraisa for them and explain it and darshan it out and whatever. Now, speaking of darshan, the second full camp of Amoraim were called Darshanim. The Darshanim were, if you will, I could say, the guards of a sort of Pnimius HaTorah, they were in charge of looking at the fundamental aspects of Agadata, and they were the Balei Kabbalah. They to understand the interior dimension of the Torah, darshaning psukim and understanding what's going on in the Chumash, the stories behind it. The darshanim were kind of in charge of that, and you'll find that in halacha you'll see mostly poskim like Rav and Shmuel, or mostly you'll find them in matters of halacha. Rabbi Yochanan and Reish Lakish also mostly in halacha, although all of them do a little bit of darshaning for Agadata. And then you'll find Amoraim like Rabbi Barchia or Rabbi Tanchuma or Rabbi Levi or Rabbi Reuven, another one, Rabbi Simlai, who you won't see. You'll very, very, very rarely in all of Shas, you will very, very rarely see their opinion in a major halachic issue, but mostly you're going to be seeing them in Agadata and explaining in out meanings of psukim and within the Torah or stories in what happened in Bayis Sheni or the like. So today we're going to deal first with a little piece of Agadata about Baraisa, and then we'll learn the third. You remember I grouped up the 21 klalim into different groups, and the first group includes 3 klalim: Tosefta, Baraisa, and Pirush. And we're going to learn the third one, Pirush, today. And then after we learn Pirush, then we're going to learn a sugi and Gemara that actually involves all 3 and shows how they work inside together and how they interact with each other. So it's basically a story of just sum up everything, because we're actually going to start here, but I'm going to sum this up so you know what happened for. There was a certain time when Rabbi Yochanan had a chavrusa. His name was Ilfa, and Ilfa was a fantastic, unbelievable chacham. You do find him quoted in many places in Shas. Actually came across him in Tamura just earlier today. Whatever. He's a tremendous chacham, but they was in a time of shnas besudas for them, a famine, if you will, and both Rabbi Yochanan and Reish, both Rabbi Yochanan and Ilfa went off and they worked a little bit. They went off to work a little bit, and Rabbi Yochanan was one point further on down the line. Rabbi Yochanan heard a pasuk or a baskel and he heard it that he should go back and learn, and Ilfa didn't hear it, and suffice it to say, Ilfa went out and continued working, and Rabbi Yochanan went back to the yeshiva. He was very matzliach. He was very successful in the yeshiva, and he became the Rosh Yeshiva very quickly. So that's kind of the story of what happened before that. Here, Ilfa came back and visited the yeshiva from Rabbi Yochanan, and the students said to him, because Ilfa was really unbelievable, and the students said to Ilfa, they said, if you had never left, if you came back, then even if Rabbi Yochanan was here, we would have made you the Rosh Yeshiva instead of Rabbi Yochanan. And he says to me, let me prove to you that I'm an even greater chacham than Rabbi Yochanan. Well, say what you will, Yeshus, not Yeshus. I would be very careful before accusing one of the Amoraim of Yeshus, whatever. But so Ilfa decided to do something daring to demonstrate himself, and he indeed went ahead and did so. So what happened? Azo v'tala nafshe ba'askariya desfinta. He gets up to leave. He went and he hung himself off of the mast of a boat. On there, he said to all of the Talmidim around him, he said, "Ike deshal li b'misnisa de Rabbi Chia v'Rabbi Oshaya. If you guys can ask to me from a Mishnah from a Baraisa, Misnisa with an aleph at the end denotes a Baraisa. Misnisan with a nun at the end denotes a Mishnah. The Misnisa that Rabbi Chaim and Rabbi Oshaya in a Tosefta or a Baraisa. If you can ask me something from a Tosefta or Baraisa of Rabbi Chia and Rabbi Oshaya, below Pshitna Leim Misnisan, and I can't show you a Mishnah where we can derive this Baraisa from. Nefila Maskarea the Svinta Vetavin. I'm going to throw myself off of the mast of this boat and I'm going to drown. That's what he said. A lot of chutzpah there. Positive chutzpah, okay. So Asa who saw a certain elder, figures an elder would be the one to try him. Yeah, Tanale, he brought to him a Baraisa. The Baraisa reads as follows: Ha'emer tnu shekel livanai b'Shabbos. So here's what we're dealing with. We're dealing with the person who's ill. He's gonna pass away, and it's on Shabbos. We're not sure if this guy's gonna live until after Shabbos. And he says to a friend, he says to who he gave the money to a trusted friend, and he says to this friend, give a shekel from this money to my son. Now we make after Shabbos, of course. Nishkeret on Shabbos from Dini Mamanos, but after Shabbos we make a examination. And we examine Now a selah is a lot more than a shekel. And we're talking about. So Rashi explains on this that the shekel, certain smaller amount, selahs many times that, and if we see, we look at how many children he has. Yeah, if he has a lot of children, and it is not, it's not possible for them to live on a shekel, or they're to live on a shekel, then we give them more. In other words, if they need a selah from their father's belongings in order to live, then we give to them a selah. Now this is Rashi explains, it's up at the top, but we're not going to go up there, that the reason we make the assumption that the reason why he said a shekel is because he wanted to give them a shekel, and then the rest would be later, and that they should be mizares, they should be earnest in their parnasa and trying to make a living, and that they shouldn't get lazy. But if they need a selah, if they need more, we examine and we give them more. Now, if they need more, then we give them a selah. Noisnin lahem selah. Yeah. Be'im amar, and if he says, if this guy, the father, says, Al titnu lahem ella shekel, do not give to them except a shekel. Ein noisnin lahem ella shekel. We can only give them a shekel. So he gave us, the first case, he gave us room. He said, give them a shekel. Oh, maybe you can give them more. But if he says, don't give to them except a shekel, now you can only give them a shekel. Im amar, so im mesa, then bear with me because there's a girsa change here. They take out the word amar. So it says im mesa if he dies, when he dies. Yosha acherim, and other people, other sons, it depends, will inherit him instead of them, or he causes others to inherit instead of them. Ben sha'amar tnu, whether he said give a shekel, yeah, or whether he said do not give to them except a shekel, we give only a noisnim and ella shekel, give to them only a shekel, because already it's in the reshus of someone else, but even though someone else now owns it, we still have that someone else still has to give them a shekel, according to this Tana's opinion. So what does he say? Yeah, he says Amalei. He says this Baraisa up until now. was what the Sava, the certain elder, told to Ilfa. Was Ilfa's response? Ilfa's response was Hamani. He said, who was the Tana of this Baraisa? Rebbe Meir here. It's Rebbe Meir. Why? The Amar mitzvah l'kayim divrei hames, because we find in a Mishnah, in Gittin, and other places, we darshan in Perek, maybe Gimel of Gittin, I think, if I remember correctly, that Rebbe Meir says specifically mitzvah l'kayim divrei hames, that if a person passes away, then it's a mitzvah for the Yorshim and also for the Beis Din to do what he said. Not everyone holds by this, by the way. Only Rebbe Meir and a couple of other people, but there are people who argue. So you see, basically, he said he was so confident that every Baraisa had to be derived from a Mishnah that he would hang his life on it. And indeed, he was able to figure out a Mishnah. He was able to figure out who the Tana was. So we see then in the Baraisa, it must be that the Baraisa has to be able to be derived from a Mishnah, and if it seems like it's coming up with something new and fresh, then the Gemara is going to question it. Actually, if you were doing Chazar in Beitza today, there's on I think Vav, Daf Vav, around there, in Maisa, where the Gemara questions a Baraisa, because it seems like maybe there's some substance of a question of maybe it's something new that isn't taught in the Mishnah.
Oh yeah, that's actually exactly what I was doing today.
There you go. But that's actually the Gemara. The reason why the Gemara questions that Baraisa is for exactly this reason. The Gemara has a question on that Baraisa because it wonders, can we derive this from a Mishnah? Can we assume this from the Mishnah? Or maybe we can't assume it from the Mishnah. And so there's an Machlokes in Rashi and Tosfos over there about whether it's a valid Baraisa that the halacha doesn't go according to, or whether it was actually a Mishaveshta. Tosfos says it's actually a Mishaveshta. Rashi says it's a valid Baraisa. The halacha just doesn't go according to it. So yeah, that's going to be all over Shas. That's a klal. If you see a Baraisa and it has to be able to be derived from the Mishnah, and if it's not, in halacha I'm talking about. When we're talking about this, we're talking about halachic Baraisa. Baraisa and Agadata, once again, we'll talk about that when we go into Agada. But in the meantime, halachic Baraisa must be able to be derived from the Mishnah. And if it's not, the Gemara is going to ask him. So next thing we're going to go over, we're going to jump back into here, yeah?
I don't have a criminal.
This nobody has a printout of. It goes back up on the screen every single time. Although I gave out prints out of it some time ago. I think I gave it out on... maybe I have more upstairs, I'll figure it out. But I gave it out when we did Tosefta, by the way. So, but see me after class and I'll get you a copy. But you can also find this in the back of every copy of the Masechta Brachos that is not art scroll. Huh?
Not every copy.
Every full copy. That's true. You won't find it in the student copy. You'll only find it you won't find it in art school either. But in the back is... Huh? Tuvias what?
Tuvias Gemara.
Tuvias Gemara. Okay. Whenever you're in it. So, Tosefta, we went over this. Tosefta is the shiur. Mishnah, Baraisa is Sfarim that were after the Mishnah. And as we talked about, Tosefta is going to be really strong because it was written down immediately. Baraisas are going to be weaker because they were learned Baal Peh longer over time. Now, we're going to learn this little one here at the bottom today, and then you'll see how they work in action together. So, a Pirush is what it sounds like. It's something that's going to come to explain. As I said, the Mishnah is very concise, it's very terse. There are 99 times out of 100, there's going to be a Mishnah that the Gemara is going to be not sure what it's saying. Oftentimes you'll find a Mishnah that the Gemara is not going to know what it's saying. Not just why not going to know what it's saying, or not going to understand why it's teaching things the way it is. For instance, one question that people might ask is, if the Mishnah is teaching teaching two chidushim, right? And one of them can be assumed from the other. In other words, one is a greater chiddush, like, this is aser on Shabbos, because it's aser on Yom Tov, and how much more so must it be aser on Shabbos? Because, so why does it need to teach Shabbos and Yom Tov? Just as an example, there might be a Mishnah that it'll teach first Yom Tov and then it'll teach Shabbos, or it'll teach something is aser on Yom Tov and then it'll teach it's also aser on Shabbos. So why does it teach Yom Tov first and then Shabbos?
Because you might think that it's not aser on Yom Tov. Aser on Shabbos if it just taught you it was aser on Yom Tov.
But we might be able to assume that since Shabbos is more strict than Yom Tov, and because malacha zeichel nefesh, food malacha is allowed on Yom Tov, and none of it's allowed on Shabbos, you might think that since it's aser on Yom Tov, then of course it must also be aser on Shabbos, yeah? So that's what a Pirush comes to do. Pirush is going to ask, Maikach, what is this? What is the Mishnah saying? Why is the Mishnah teaching this? Why is it teaching in this order? Why does it need to teach this at all? Why can't it just teach? Why can't it teach A and we can assume B from A? This is going to be your Pirush. It's going to be a question that comes on the Mishnah. Pirush hu hava be'akvei Mishnah. It comes right after the Mishnah. That can mean it can come right after the Mishnah, or it can also mean it can come right after a quote from the Mishnah. So, in the mashal you see in Gemara, we go through a certain amount, and then the Gemara will give you the little quote. It'll have a colon, and then it'll give you a little quote, and then it'll continue. Yeah. So the little quote from the Mishnah also, it could come, a Pirush could come. This sort of klal could come right after that as well. Having inyan in Mishnah to understand what does the Mishnah B'chal say? I mean, is the Mishnah saying? Your classic example in the Mishnah that we learn, in the very first Mishnah in Shas, was we asked, why did the very first thing that he asked was, why did we teach Aravit first? Why didn't we teach Shacharit first? That was the Pirush, the question that opened up the entire Masechta of Brachos, was why did we teach evening first? Why didn't we teach morning first? So it's a whole question. I mean, why didn't we? And then it gives a variety of answers on that, and that's so. Kishavo alav maikach yavo Pirush alav. So the Gemara asks maikach, what is this that the Mishnah is saying? And a Pirush is going to come right after that to reassure you of what's actually going on, to explain to you what's going on. Any questions before we jump inside to actually see an example of it in the Masechta Brachos? Okay, let's see the example. So this is the other thing that you saw. We're actually only going to be dealing with from this Mishnah here at the very top, and going down from there. Actually, do it so that it fills the screen here. I think that captures just about everything. Yeah. So this is actually the second Mishnah in Masechta Brachos. You'll find it on Daf Tes on the base. I like it because it's a demonstrative sugya of where we see Pirush coming into action, and then we see a Tosefta being brought as a Baraisa, and the Gemara Poskins like the Tosefta and against the Mishnah. So the Baraisa Poskins against the Mishnah in favor of Tosefta. So you see it kind of going into action and seeing how they work together and how they argue on each other, if you will. So does anyone want to try to read the Mishnah up here? It's dealing with the morning Shema. So, anyone?
So,
You have it in front of you as well.
don't read off of that.
Yeah, it's probably a lot closer.
Okay, so Ma Mise,
May Masai.
Mi Masai, Korin Shema, the Shachris.
From when? Yeah.
From when do we read the Shema and Shachris?
In the morning. Yeah.
In the morning. Meshikir,
Mishiyakir.
Bain Tachlas, Techelis, Loven. When we can tell Techelis from white.
Yeah, blue from white.
Rabbi Eliezer, Oimer. Bain Tachlas, Bain Techelis, Lechor.
Lecharsi is green. Is green.
Is green. Okay, so he says whether it's techelis or green.
Between techelis, tell the difference between techelis and green.
Whether to see the difference between techelis and green, oid hanet.
Ugemora, and to finish Shema, ada netzachama, until before the sun rises.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a pretty short period of time, right? From the time the sun's up enough that you can recognize the difference between blue and white and then you have to finish your entire Shema by Netzachama, by the time the sun rises. That's pretty early. Now, Rabbi Yeshua is going to argue. What is he going to argue on? Is he arguing on the beginning, or is he arguing on the end only?
The end.
The end. He's only arguing on the end. So you'll see that. Pay attention to where the machlokes is, because there's no machlokes on the beginning. And that isn't that true? In the Mishnah, there's no machlokes in the beginning. In the Mishnah, there's no machlokes in the beginning. In the Tosefta, we're going to see a machlokes in the beginning.
So Rabbi Yehoshua Omer says Rabbi Yehoshua ad shalosh shayis, until 3 hours
into the day. Yeah.
Shechein derech malachim.
The name. Yeah, derech malachim.
Oimed b'shalosh shayis. So
because it's the way
of what people who do work
of kings. The way of kings. The way of kings to wake up in 3 hours into the day.
Oh, kings.
Yeah. Yidden are likened to royalty, right? Yeah. As the 3 hours into the day. Actually, it's interesting. The Seder Mishnayos. Sometimes this reading in Gemara and Seder Mishnayos is going to differ in terms of how we see the Mishnah, as well as in Yerushalmi and Bavli. Sometimes the Mishnah will differ how the Mishnah is presented, and in Seder Mishnayos, the Mishnah presents it as Shekein derech b'nei malachim b'shlosh.
Yeah.
You remember it. It's the Gemara presents as malachim, and the Mishnah in Seder Mishnayos presents it as b'nei malachim. There's lots of little things that are interesting and send up a little red light when you're learning Gemara if you've learned Mishnayos before. So let's continue. Okay,
Hakoira Makan, from a verse.
Hakoira, someone who recites Kriyas Shema. Mikan ve'elech.
Mikan ve'elech, and
say it out loud. Yes.
Mikan is like from there, right?
From here.
From here, elech lo.
And onwards. From
and
here
onwards,
and
no.
Lo hefsid. He didn't lose.
Lo hefsid. He didn't interrupt.
Yeah. He didn't lose. He didn't lose out.
Oh, right. He didn't lose out. Okay. Adam hakoira betoira. He's
like a person who's reciting Shema in the Torah. Baruch Hashem. So there's 3 things going on in this Mishnah here. First, you have the time that Zman Kriyas Shema begins, which looks like it's a stam, but we're going to have a machlekes later on. and in a Baraisa. And actually it's a Tosefta, but it's being brought under the Siman of a Baraisa. But you can actually see right here. It's, that's a Masuras Hashas telling us this is a Tosefta. Then we have a Machlokes in the middle between two Tanaim. And we know whose opinion. There's actually the opinion in Psak Halacha is going to be according to one of those two Amanayim, basically. Rabbi Yeshua, because you know that it's 3 hours into the day we say Shemata. And the third opinion that nobody is arguing. Yeah. Oh yeah. Okay. Yeah. And the third opinion that nobody is arguing on, it's 100% stam out. This means if a person Chas v'Shalom misses the Zman Kriyas Shema, they shouldn't just be like, oh, I missed out on it. You still have to say it. Even if you missed the Zman Kriyas Shema, go back and say it. Because you're not missing out. You may not be fulfilling an obligation of Kriyas Shema, but you are fulfilling an obligation of Talmud Torah, and that's really an important obligation of saying this Shema B'chol. Anyway, so now we're going to ask a couple questions on this. The Gemara is going to begin by asking a question. This is going to be your question in Pirush, immediately the first thing. My ben Tchelos Lavim. He's asking, the Gemara is asking, what does the Mishnah mean when it says ben Tchelos Lavim? Now, you might think it's something so simple, right? Ben Tchelos, between white and blue.
Between white and blue and midnight.
Yeah. There's your question. There's your answer. The Gemara is going to say, lema, if you say, yeah?
Mm-hmm.
If you say, ben gavava da amra chiyura, between a white bundle of wool, le gavava da amra de chelza, to a blue bundle of wool, b'layla nami yadai. At night, you can also tell, just like Mr. Sfara, Yosef Chaim, Mr. Sfara, Rebbe Sfara is saying in the back of the shiur today. You could also tell at night. Allah, what does it mean? This here. It says ben chelas sheba the lavan sheba. The Rashi explains that what this means is this is in one piece of fabric. In the same piece of fabric, which has splotches of white and splotches of tchelis, they're blonde. They're a little bit blurred into each other to tell the difference between where they. That's what ben tchelis is. So that right there, that was the third claw that we learned today. This is Pirush. We took a phrase from the Mishnah. We grabbed onto it, and we asked what is even the Mishnah saying. Now, coming right after that, directly after that, now we're going to bring a Tosefta, which is, it's being brought under the Siman of a Baraisa. It says Tanya, but it is actually a Tosefta, and this Gemara is one of the older that I have this from. Yeah?
That Pirush is just being brought by people in the base Midrash.
Yeah.
And it's
being asked by the Gemara. Sometimes.
Yeah.
Sometimes you'll see it under the name of an Amora. We'll ask, Amr, Rav Papa, Mai, V'chulu. They're going to ask. Sometimes you'll see it in the name of an Amora, but oftentimes it'll be just the Gemara asking. The Gemara being an Amora or the like who's asking in the base Medrash, what's this question?
With many klalim, we see that it does say, or many of the things we have learned so far, that they usually say Tanya or Tosefta or whatever, but in this case they don't. With a Pirush, they usually don't have like a siman that.
When you see my something, and after that is a statement in the Mishnah, that begins your Pirush.
Okay.
So the whole Pirush is until it says that it's in it.
My ben Tchelos 11. We're gonna say
Until the Tanya.
Yeah, until the Tanya. That's
the whole
that's
thing is the Pirush.
The Pirush is divided into two parts. The Makshin and the Tartzin, we call it. The Makshin is the person who's asking the question, and the Tartzin is the one who's answering the question. Those are two terms, by the way. Makshin and Tartzin are going to be two terms that we're going to be using a lot in this class. Makshin is the one who asks the questions. Tartzin is the one who answers the question. So the Makshin is saying, what is the Mishnah saying? Ben Chelas Alaman.
Are the word roots there from Kasha and Tirat?
Yes, Kasha and Tirat. That's the root. The Makshin is the person who asks the Kasha. Good call. And the Tartzin is the one who gives the Tirat. So in this Pirush here, the Makshin, my Ben Chelas Alaman. What's the difference between what does the Mishnah mean by ben Chelas Alaman? Inlay Matthew say ben Gvava da Amra Chiura, the Gvava da Amra the Tchelsa, a bundle of white wool, a bundle of wool of Tchelas, Ha B'Lanami Yudeya. Now the Tiritz begins here. Ela ben Tchelas Shiva L'Lavan Shiva. That's the Makshin Tartzin right there. That it's the Gemara. Well, here the Makshin and Tartzin is both the Gemara asking and answering. It's not. Sometimes you'll see that at two different Amarayim, the Pirush are the Makshin and the Tartzin, but here we're going to be dealing. Here's just the Gemara on both sides. Now.
But so when we have just this Stam opinion, where do we know that it's coming from, if we do ever know where it's coming from?
If there's a name that's by it, you know who the name is coming by.
But no, I mean to differentiate from the case where there is a name, like in the case here. We know it's just people in the base Midrash shiur.
Yeah.
But they received it as Kabbalah. It's just something that everyone accepts. That's
if someone argues on it, which occasionally they do, you'll see. Technically a Pirush is usually a statement of Amarayim, and of this sort is usually a statement of Amarayim, and such a Pirush can be challenged both by another Amora, or it can be challenged with the different challenges of Tanaim, which we'll talk about later on. We'll go into Mesve and Ramya and Hatzucha, the different challenges that come from Mishnayos and Baraisas, which can be used to challenge an Ammonic statement. But if it's an Amora arguing on it, yes, but you'll know if it's a Tanaic statement that's arguing. I should say not arguing on it, but contradicting it, because sometimes the Pirush is going to go on something that's mashma, something that's implied or inferred, and won't always pick like a clearer answer. And if it's going on something that's implied or inferred, someone might come and try and reject that inference and draw a different inference. So now we're going to have our Baraisa, or Tosefta. Here it is a Tosefta, but it's being brought as a Baraisa. Tanya. The Gemara brings a Baraisa. Rabbi Meir says, Mishiakar bin Zev l'Chalif. When you can recognize the difference between a wolf and a dog. Rabbi Akiva says, Ben Chamer la'aret, between a donkey and a wild donkey. Which is, the Acherim omrim, Mishayira es chavero rachok daled amos. Huh? Uh-huh.
Be finished and then I have a question.
The Yakirenu, and you recognize it.
Okay. The Acharim. Now we have Rabbi Meir.
There we go.
Okay,
Good. That's the right question to ask.
Okay.
That's the question I would have explained that whether or not you asked. Tosfos is actually asking this very question, and there are those who explain on the Tosfos of what it means, and we actually see it later on in Perek Dalet, Perek Hey. I think Einam Dim or Tfilas HaShachar, we see a similar thing going on. Tosfos over there pinpoints and says this is it. Oh, Ein Hachinami also, though, over there on Daf Tes, this is also the case. Acherim b'mekayim Rabbi Meir. When Rabbi Meir is already been taught that. Acherim, as we know, is usually Rabbi Meir. Why is Rabbi Meir called Acherim? Because he learned from Acher. It says in Halichas Olam that he learned from Acher, Elisha ben Abuya, and so the Chochamim would nickname him occasionally Acherim. Now, according to what Taisus says over there. Acherim onrim over here. When you see Rebbe Meir and you see Acherim, it's the opinion of actual Acher himself, Elisha ben Abuya, is being brought. And it blew my mind when I found this out, because we actually poskin according to Acher here. We're poskin according to the Acherim, and here's the Amar Rav Huna halacha k'acherim. In this Baraisa, halacha k'acherim. So that
Can you say that Sor Acher's name spelled out?
you can find it in Perek Dalet, I believe, in Pirkei Avos. It's
They love to talk about him in the religious studies departments.
Religious studies. Okay. He's an interesting, very interesting character, because he was in the Gemara, a lot of very confusing things surrounding him. Arba Nicholas Lepardes, the four that went into Pardes, Reb Shimon ben Azeh, Reb Shimon ben Zema, Acher, and Reb Yekiva. There's a lot that the Gemara and Mishnah and the like it has to say about these individuals, and what were their positions. You know the story of the Asar Hargim Malchus that we read on Yom Kippur with what Rabbi Akiva darshaning the crowns on letters. You know, very, very beautiful things. But Paul, it has to be in some level brought down into matters of halacha, and the four of them you will find both in darshaning, in interpreting psukim, and also in halacha. There's an interesting Maisa that, the whole idea of Gehinnom and Kafa Kela, and that, Chas v'shalom, Rahman litzlan, but an individual who, Kafa Kela, an individual who is set for that, it's better that they should be going to Gehinnom, and then they'll be done with it. So it actually, when Acher passed away, then Reb Meir was afraid that he would be stuck in Kafa Kela for a couple hundred years. And so he davened that Acher would go to Gehinnom in order that he should be cleaned off in less than a year, and then he should be going right back up to the Yeshiva Shamayla to learn with his chaverim from before what happened. But it's a whole mice over there. It's very interesting. Regardless, you see right here, it says Acherim Omrim. The Acherim say that when do we say Kodesh Shema Shel Amita Shel Shachar, excuse me. Mishayana Eschaveiro Rachuk Daled Amos, when you see your friend from 4 Amos away, V'yakarena, and you can recognize him. And as you guys know, because you've learned Hilchos Kodesh Shema in either the Kitzur Shulchan Aruch, or some of you in the Alter Rebbe Shulchan Aruch, and you know that is the halacha from the time that you can recognize your friend from 4 Amos away. And we're not talking about recognizing a friend who has an unusual and an uncommon look about them, who you could recognize from 8 Amos away. We're talking about your stam average friend, because there are some people at this yeshiva who you can recognize from quite a long way away. I mean, just you see them, there's hello, it's Tuvia.
He's taller than everyone else.
yeah. I mean, just to give an example. So, any questions?
So this is a Baraisa, which is, you're saying
it's being brought as a Baraisa, but you actually see that this is an older Gemara. So this is some Masuras Shas is going to be on the side here. I like this particular time. This particular time proves to be useful because it says right next to it, it's a Tosefta from Perek Aleph of Brachos, Tosefta Brachos, and you find the Tosefta is being quoted there. That's this Baraisa is being brought as a Tosefta. And if you remember, I said last week a Tosefta that's being brought on the Siman Baraisa, according to some opinions, a Tosefta can be brought as a Baraisa. According to other opinions, a Tosefta is never brought as a Baraisa, but this Tosefta, there used to be a Baraisa that was similar or the same, and we lost it. So in our case, it appears that it's a Tosefta, and even though it's being brought under a similar Baraisa. Yeah?
The whole Tosefta goes all the way up until he recognizes him?
V'yakarena. As soon as Rav Huna is one of the third generation Amoraim, he was a student of Rav, and Rav Huna is poskening here. It's another klal, another very straightforward klal that we're going to be examining later on, which is Hilchasa. When we're learning Hilchasa, then you'll say when an Amora comes after when an Amora comes after a thing and says. When an Amor comes after a Baraisa and says halacha v'chulu, or even after a Mamada says halacha v'chulu, that's a halacha. Now, sometimes, all right, so
there's an argument after that. Cause
sometimes there's a machlokes after that, but the Poe usually when the Gemara paskins, that's going to be where the halacha is going to be. Now, what the Shulchan Aruch is going to say is not necessarily going to be the same, because in Mice of the Poe, sometimes there are differences in terms of where the Shulchan Aruch is going to go, both in terms of situational stuff and the like. I can't give you an example at this moment because it's not a Shulchan Aruch class, and I don't have Balpeh, all these situations, but b'pashtus, when the Gemara says halacha, that's going to be the halacha. And in this particular case, the Gemara is you can see the little Ein Mishpat Ner Mitzvah Aleph right there. Now Rav Huna paskins like the Acherim, and it continues. Amar Abai, let's fill in Ka'acherim, let's fill in also Ka'acherim, and actually that's going to be the halacha later on, talking about tefillin. We also are going to go according to Acherim, according to Acher. This particular person is,
And it says it's halacha too.
Yeah, this is also says tefillin. Yes, that is also going to be saying Abai, Amar Abai. Oh yeah. While we're saying that the halacha goes like Acher, in this case, we're also okay. You're not gonna also the halacha goes like Acher in this other case, and I mean that's the Das of Tosfos, by the way. Just what it says over there, and it says Acher is and also you can look in the bottom in Hagos V'Tzunim over there, and it'll talk a lot about it a little more. If someone wants to ask me about it after class, I can show them, like inside, like, oh yeah, okay, Acherim b'makom Rebbe Meir, all right, usually Acher. It's either Acher or it's the opinion of Acher being brought by Rebbe Meir. Well, but either way, it's the opinion of Acher. It says that the Krishma Kavisikin. Okay, we're not going to go into it now. Kinu Chachamim will, if you want to learn Halichas Olam with me, then we'll learn Kinu Chachamim. Any further questions before we finish up for the night? Because now we've accomplished. Yeah.
So we thought that when it said Emosai Kirin and Shema, we thought that was just this from the outset. It would seem like that was just a stam opinion.
It seems like it's a stam opinion.
But then we brought this.
But
right.
We're going to talk about the idea of stam ba'achar machlekes, which usually that only refers to a Mishnah, but in this case, because it's a Tosefta, we might have that call coming into.
So would we say ordinarily that if it was just a Baraisa and a Baraisa isn't as strong as
a normal Baraisa, then it would have paskined according to the Mishnah. We're going to learn about that. There's later on, after we finish all 21 klalim, there's another page or so of miniature klalim, between Tanaim, who halakha goes like who, the Tanakh of Amraim, halakha goes like who, that are just going to be useful to see throughout the Gemara, but they're just like useful. They're not like puzzle pieces that put everything together.
Okay.
So, any other questions? Thank you. I don't know. Next week we'll start to get into other stuff, but you'll notice how they start to work together. Like today, you saw how a Pirush and a Baraisa came later. Mishnah Pirush Baraisa. And that was already you can dissect, 8 lines of Gemara into its proper parts already, just in this particular case. All right, so we'll continue next week. Be'ezras Hashem.
Great.